Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Dominaria spoilers. And today is the official kickoff of spoiler season. We had the weird trickle of spoilers for the last 10 days, but today it is officially here, which means we have a ton to talk about. 4 mythics, a bunch of sweet legends, just tons of crazy stuff, which means we gotta jump right into it, or this video is gonna be like an hour long. So we're gonna start off today talking about the new mythics, including one that is brand new, even not part of the leak, and that is Weatherlight. So Weatherlight, the return of vehicles in Dominaria, 4 mana, 4/5 legendary artifact vehicle, and it's pretty powerful. The crew cost is a bit high at 3, but whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and take a historic card from among them, reveal it, put it in your hand. Historic, again, artifacts, legendary, sagas. So in the right build, this is a lot of repeatable card advantage on a big body flying around in the air. So Weatherlight is a callback to Skyship Weatherlight, a great flavor card, really cool just to see all the history and the callbacks in this set. So Skyship Weatherlight, not super powerful, but whatever, it's a cool callback anyway. As far as gameplay, Weatherlight makes you realize just how pushed the vehicles were in Kaladesh. Weatherlight, kind of like a weird cross between Smuggler's Copter and Heart of Kirin, but it's way more mana, it has a high crew cost, so I feel like it ranks behind a lot of the Kaladesh vehicles right now in terms of gameplay. I don't think you're going to play this over Heart of Kirin, I don't think you're going to play this maybe even over Aethersphere Harvester, but I could imagine it definitely being a nice one-of addition to a deck like Mardu vehicles, because we already have a deck that's kind of perfect for Weatherlight. We have things to crew it, we have things to hit with it, and one of the interesting aspects of Weatherlight is you don't really have to be overwhelmed with historic cards to make it work. I ran the numbers. If you have 10 historic cards in your deck, you're like 62% to hit one in your top 5 cards. So you don't need to have 20, 30 historic cards. You can play Weatherlight with just a handful, like in a normal Mardu vehicle deck where you have 4 Heart of Kirins, some number of Aethersphere Harvesters, maybe a Sky Sovereign Council Flagship, maybe you kind of push your deck a little bit towards Legendary for DePaulo, which works really well with Weatherlight, and then you're going to be hitting something with Weatherlight a reasonable percentage of the time, plus you have a big body in the air anyway, so I think Weatherlight, most likely home, going to be like a one-of perhaps in Mardu vehicles. We'll see if maybe some new spicy decks develop from it. Can this bring back Metalwork Colossus and kind of recreate an artifact themed deck? But I think for the immediate future, maybe slots in as a one-of in Mardu vehicles and potentially does some sweet new things as well. I don't think it's anywhere near as powerful as the Kaladesh vehicles, just a little more expensive, high crew cost, not as big. When you consider Heart of Kirin is a 4/4 for 2, and this is a 4/5 for 4 with the same crew cost, just not quite the same, but I do think this can be a very good card in the right build, and I'm excited to see what happens with it. And that's not even including the sweet flavor callbacks to Skyship Weatherlight. Next up, we have Jaya Weatherlight Captain, and this card is pretty exciting. So another legend, 4 mana, you get a 3/3, and whenever you cast a historic spell, which is, again, artifact, legendary, or saga, you get to draw a card. So this card is kind of like a weird cross between Riki, the History of Kamigawa, which draws whenever you cast a legend, and Vidalcan Archmage draws whenever you cast an artifact. You get both of those with Jaya Weatherlight Captain, and you get it on a more reasonable body. When you consider Vidalcan Archmage is a 0/2 for 4, and Jaya is a 3/3 for 4, it's actually a really powerful card, and artifact drawing is really powerful because there's so many cheap artifacts that are available to be cast, and that's not even including the upside. I think the ranking of historic is artifacts, that's going to be the most common play. You play Jaya in your artifact deck, go crazy drawing a bunch of cards, maybe you play it in a legendary deck as well, and then saga is just a weird bonus. But when you think of Jaya as a commander, legal as your commander, upgraded Vidalcan Archmage, it's a pretty powerful card anyway. As far as standard is concerned, I'm mostly excited because Jaya triggers on some some of the same things as SRAM. Equipments, vehicles are artifacts, so Jaya could be like additional copies of SRAM Senior Edificer, which might create the potential for some sort of like SRAM-O Storm deck. We got a lot of the pieces of the modern deck. We even have Mox Amber, which is kind of like our version of the Mox, SRAM, Legendary, Jaya, or Legendary. We got the paradoxical outcome, so I think it's possible that we can build a crazy SRAM-O style deck with the combined power of Jaya and SRAM, because having both of those means we're likely to have one of that effect on the battlefield and just go to town casting our Mox Ambers, casting a bunch of cheap equipments, paradoxical outcome them all back to our hand, and just go crazy, win the game, storming off eventually with Aetherflux Reservoir or something. So Jaya, I think it will show up in certain artifact-based decks, maybe even combo-based decks in Standard. Not sure about Modern, little expensive for Modern, but it's going to be a super fun, super sweet commander. Drawing cards is one of my favorite things to do in Commander. Jaya seems like a great option for a artifact-heavy deck in Commander format, cheap enough to get down early, generates a bunch of card advantage. Once it dies, you get it back again and again and again, so a really sweet Commander card as well. Next on our list, we have Mox Amber. We were just talking about this in regards to the combo deck, and Mox Amber is the next in a long line of Moxen. We had the original Mox, Mox Pearl and Friends, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal. Mox Amber is kind of next in line, but you gotta say, Mox Amber is the most restrictive of any of these Moxes when you consider that Mox Pearl and the original Moxes just tap for mana. Mox Diamond, you gotta discard a land. Mox Opal, you need 3 artifacts. Mox Amber has a very tricky condition to meet. You need to have a legendary creature or planeswalker on the battlefield, and you only get mana of a color of a legend you control. So if you have, let's say, just a green legend on the battlefield, your Mox Amber is only tapping for green mana, so it's going to be hard to use it like Mox Opal or Mox Diamond is mana fixing. Going to be hard to use it like Mox Pearl is just an additional land because you got to have the legend on the battlefield. But you never want to underestimate a Mox. Even though I think Mox Amber is by far the least powerful Mox we've seen pretty much every Mox in the history of Magic be very, very good. Adding an additional mana for free on an artifact is just a very strong ability. And if you look at the options that are available, there are things you can do with it. In Standard, we have cheap legends like Avaya Parishi, say Lightcrafter. We've seen Isumuru get some hype in Modern for being able to play Isumaro, play a Mox Amber, play another 1-drop, and just get this explosive double Savannah Lion start on turn 1. Jace Prodigy is a legend in both forms, so it kind of works there. On turn 2, you can play your Jace, play Mox Amber, and maybe Thought Seize your opponent. On the other hand, it's worth pointing out that Mox Amber, I've seen some confusion about this, does not work with Hope of Gurapur, does not work with legendary lands. So remember how Mox Amber reads. Add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures or planeswalkers you control. That does not include colorless. Colorless is the lack of color. It's not a color, so you can't tap Mox Amber for colorless mana if you have Hope of Gurapur. So keep that in mind as you're deck building. Gotta be a creature, gotta be a planeswalker, one or the other, or both, and you have to have colored permanents. You can't do any tricks with colorless. So I think there is maybe some potential in Standard. When you think about the starts you can get, we'll have to see if the deck building cost and restriction is too high of having legends, because you do need a lot of legends to make Mox Amber do anything, and if you're playing 4 Ovaya Parishi Sage Lifecrafters, you're going to get some weird clunky draws where you have just so many legends and mulliganing into oblivion essentially, but you can do some really explosive things, like turn 1 Ovaya Parishi, play Mox Amber, also play a Land and War Elves, back in Standard of course, and then you have 4 mana on turn 2, you can be playing Bristling Hydras, 5 mana on turn 3, so you can go really crazy with Mox Ambers and do some really explosive things. The question is going to be, can we figure out a way to make this work without the deck being too clunky thanks to all the legends you need? Is it going to be good enough just to play in your deck? Let's say you play a 4 mana Planeswalker and then Mox Amber gives you an extra mana. I don't know. That doesn't feel very Mox-like to me, to have it coming down on turn 4, turn 5 and doing something. Usually the Moxen are powerful because they're explosive in the early game, so we'll have to see. It's a really tricky card to figure out. Have to figure out if it's worth the deck building restriction of playing so many legends, but like I said, never underestimate a Mox because it's going to be good somewhere. Every other one has been, so I think it might take a while, but sooner or later someone else will probably figure out how to use Mox Amber and make it good. Also worth mentioning, this this is a pretty insane mox for commander decks, because commander decks playing legends, not a downside. You're playing one of everything anyway, plus you have a legend in your command zone 100% of the time, so I think that Mox Amber going to be very good for commander for that reason as well. Plus, like, the original Mox are banned in the format, so I think we'll see some explosive Mox Amber starts in commander. We'll see what happens in other formats. I think it's got a shot. Not completely sold on the casting 2 Savannah Lions on turn 1, but there's got to be something we can do with it. It's just going to take a little while to figure it out. Our next mythic, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, our first of 2 planeswalkers on today, and I really love this card. 5 mana, 4 loyalty, plus when you draw a card beginning your end step, you get to untap 2 lands. -3, you tuck a non-land permanent into its owner's library, 3 from the top, so kind of protection / removal. And then the emblem, all you gotta do is draw cards, and you get to exile away all of your opponent's board. So I think Teferi reminds me a little bit of like the blue-white version of Obnixilis, combined a little bit with Jace Memory Adept. So the abilities on Teferi are very much like Obnixilis. +1 draws you a card, -3 is protection / removal, emblem wins you the game as you draw cards. So I think that that's probably the easiest comparison. If you look at the actual abilities, Teferi's +1 definitely better than Obnixilis's +1. Untapping those 2 lands, really powerful, lets you do some tricky things, leaving up removal and counters. -3, definitely worse usually than just destroying a creature, although it is worth pointing out, in a world of Hazoret the Fervent, being able to tuck a creature rather than kill it does have some upsides in certain matchups. And then the emblem of both is game winning. The biggest reason I'm kind of bullish on Teferi's chance of actually seeing some amount of play in standard is Jace Memory Adept. Jace Memory Adept is not a great planeswalker, but it says +1 draw card, and that was enough for Jace Memory Adept to see play in standard. So Teferi, across the board, has more relevant abilities than Jace. 5 mana, 4 loyalty, same +1 ability with an upgrade, upgraded negative abilities. So I think the fact that Jace Memory Adept, which is just not a super exciting planeswalker, did see play in standard just to +1 draw a card, draw a card, draw a card in control decks, means that Teferi's got a really good shot. So I don't know where Teferi fits exactly. Maybe like an Approach of the Second Sun control deck is the most natural home, or maybe control evolves a little bit and changes thanks to Teferi being a powerful option. The +1 ability, you really want to build around that a little bit. Just untapping 2 lands doesn't really do a whole lot, but if you can have a deck with sensors and essence scatters in negates, or even 2 mana removal spells that you can cast on your opponent's turn with that mana, then the +1 becomes very, very strong, because you're not only drawing a card, but you're able to leave up an essence scatter for a Scarab God, or leave up a negate for a Vraska's Contempt on your Teferi. So there's a lot of potential if you build your deck around it, and we have some good options to take advantage of that mana. So I think Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, gonna show up in standard, most likely a 1/2 of in control decks to kind of close out the game with card advantage type planeswalker, but I really like Teferi, and I think it's definitely gonna show up. It's just a matter of finding the right control build to really harness the power of the Hero of Dominaria. Finally, our last mythic and our next planeswalker, Jaya Ballard. Jaya Ballard, I don't know about this card. 5 mana, 5 loyalty, +1, you get to add some mana, +1, you can draw some cards and discard some cards, or actually the opposite, discard and then draw. -8, you get to cast a bunch of stuff from your graveyard. The end result is basically a combination of Pyretic Ritual, Cathartic Reunion, and then like a permanent Past in Flames emblem to let you cast all your instants and sorceries from the graveyard. I just don't know exactly what you do with Jaya Ballard. Like, it doesn't protect itself. It feels like a combo-y planeswalker, so I like the idea of it. It's a really unique planeswalker. We're just talking about Teferi. Feels very much like stapled on abilities in its colors, kind of the Obnixilis formula. Jaya Ballard, super unique and outside of the normal range of planeswalkers, but the fact that it's so unique makes it really hard to figure out, like, how do you build a deck around Jaya Ballard? That is the big question. It doesn't protect itself, doesn't really do anything super exciting right away, like 5 mana Cathartic Reunion, then it dies. That's not super exciting. I guess you can like play it and add mana for an Abrade or something to kill something, but overall, it seems really challenging. However, we do have some sweet pieces, and a deck that I want to try to build, I have no idea if this will actually work, but is essentially like Standard Storm. We have Brass's Bounty. That's a great way to take advantage of the mana from Jaya Ballard, an expensive free spell, but if you're getting 3 free mana from Jaya Ballard, really helps you go to town with it. Hazard's Undying Fury for tons of value, casting a ton of spells in the same turn off of our Jaya Ballard Brass's Bounty mana, plus not untapping, a little less painful if we're going to win the game right away. And then we do have Aetherflux Reservoir as our like tendrils essentially to close out the game, or our grape shot to close out the game. So I don't know if it's possible to actually make that deck work in Standard, but I definitely want to try it because it sounds really, really fun, at least it's like in a budget Magic or against the odds deck. As far as Modern, you could do some cool stuff, just like ramp into Obliterate or Worldfire or something, but it seems like a long shot for Jaya Ballard to really be able to catch on in the format. If you want to try to storm off, there's just faster and better ways to do what Jaya Ballard's going to do. So I like Jaya Ballard just because it's so unique, but I think it's probably the least powerful of the planeswalkers we've seen from Dominaria so far. Wrapping up our spoilers today, we have a bunch of uncommon legends, and important with all of these cards to remember, one of the unique takes and aspects of Dominaria is that it's got so many legends, including uncommon legends, which don't happen very often. All these cards legal as your commander, so keep that in mind. Or also the Brawl format, the new Brawl format, tons of legends for that as well. So starting our uncommon legend part of our daily spoiler video, we have Arvad the Cursed. And Arvad the Cursed, I guess if you're going to play Legendary Tribal, it's kind of sweet. For 5 mana, including 1 white and 1 black, you get a 3/3 Death Touch and Lifelink. Not a bad combination of abilities. And then it gives other legendary creatures you control +2/+2. So it's basically Day of Destiny on a body. Upside is you get a body with Death Touch and Lifelink. Downside is you lose your Day of Destinies to things like Abrade. So I don't know. I think it's a fun card. I have a hard time imagining that at 5 mana it's going to show up in competitive decks. It is a vampire and a knight, so those are 2 semi-relevant creature types. Vampire from Ixalan block, knight supported in Dominaria, but the body just is not that big. We also got Tiana, Ship's Caretaker, which, kind of like our last card, is sweet, but it suffers a bit from just being expensive and not that big body-wise. So for 5 mana, you get a 3/3. It has flying and first strike, which, again, relevant abilities. And then whenever an aura or equipment you control goes to the graveyard, you get to return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So it's kind of like a really weird, slow, restricted Scrap Trawler. You don't really have the combo potential that we see with Scrap Trawler and like Modern Eggs, because you got to wait to the end step to get your stuff back, and it's not all artifacts, it's equipment and auras, so I guess auras an upside, but I think Tiana is another card that is going to be sweet in Brawl, maybe some casual decks, but again, the body, it's just not big enough, especially with the drawback as far as Standard is concerned of being legendary. Rounding out our historic spells for today, we got a bunch more historic matter stuff. Wrath Capashen Ship's Mage is kind of cool. A 3/3 flying flash for 4 is not the worst. It's a little cheaper than the other legends we've been talking about. That's not a horrible body. And then all of your historic spells have flash. So artifacts, legends, and sagas all come in with flash. I think this is a really cool card to build around. Maybe there's some deck that could use it as like a one-of in Standard. It's kind of closer to being on curve. You can leave your mana up, cast this on your opponent's end step, or if you have a bunch of mana, flash it in and immediately start casting your legends and artifacts with flash. So I think this is the most playable of the uncommon legends we talked about. Otherwise, Cabal Paladin, meh. Definitely more of a limited thing than a standard thing. Board the Weatherlight is actually pretty sweet. It's basically a commune with the gods, but for historic spells, so you can grab an artifact, a legend, or a saga. And I think if a deck develops around any of those themes, Board the Weatherlight is going to be an easy inclusion. A little bit of a downside, potentially, that cards go to the bottom of your library instead of to the graveyard, the ones that you don't take, but it does make up for that by having a pretty wide range of things to hit. Artifacts artifact legends and sagas means there's a bunch of different themes that could take advantage of it. So this is one of those glue that holds your deck together type cards. So if you're building an artifact themed deck that has white mana, a legend themed deck, a saga deck, a good way to dig for your sagas, board the Weatherlight, definitely going to show up. We also got Slimefoot the Stowaway, which is actually a fairly competitively costed legend. 3 mana, you get a 2/3. Not super exciting. Legendary Fungus, okay, Funguses are back. Whenever a sapperling you control dies, deal a damage to each opponent, you gain a life. You can also create sapperlings for 4 mana. And this card, it's basically like a blood artist for sapperlings. The question is going to be, how much sapperling support do we get? Do we get enough sapperling support to really play a deck built around Slimefoot the Stowaway? We got Tendershoot Dryad. We know we'll get some more support, but is it enough to make a competitive deck? That remains to be seen, but it's still a super cool card, a cool black-green fungus commander. There's not that many of them. I recently played a fungus tribal deck. There's not that many options for your commanders, so I think it's a cool card to exist, both for Brawl and for Commander, and if a Sapperling deck develops, maybe Sapperling Aristocrats can be a thing, draining people out, sacking your Sapperlings to Slimefoot the Stowaway. So we'll have to see how much support there is. If there's enough, it'll be a super sweet deck though. Finally, just want to mention these cards quickly. Not playable. Calico Skin Witch, too expensive. To get the kicker, you got to spend 6 mana. Cool limited card, not going to show up in standard. And then Cabal Evangel, just the grizzly bear of the black human cleric tribe. So, limited fodder, but wanted to mention them so we talked about everything. Anyway, those have been our daily Dominaria spoilers for today. And oh my god, 5 mythics, tons of legendary uncommons. What do you think? How good is Weatherlight? Can it compete in standard right away, even with the Kaladesh vehicle still in the format? Are we going to have to wait for rotation? Just how powerful can it be? What about Joyra? How good will that card be? Can you build a standard storm deck with it? Or maybe even with Jaya Ballard? Is that planeswalker better than I'm giving it credit for? How do you break Mox Amber? What about Teferi, Hero of Dominaria? How strong is that planeswalker? And all the legendary commons and uncommons, let me know what you think about those as well. Are you going to build a Brawl deck, a Commander deck? Can they show up in standard? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.